My father-in-law mocked my career in front of the whole family, calling me a nobody with a hobby. But halfway through dinner, his biggest client walked in, shook my hand, and said, "Congratulations on becoming our new CEO." At an elegant charity gala in Manhattan, my father-in-law, the venture capital mogul, publicly ridiculed my fledgling tech company. Just another woman with a cute little business idea. He sneered to his associates. My son could have married a doctor or lawyer. Then his most important client approached our table. "James, I'd like to introduce myself properly. I'm the new CEO of Nexus Technologies." I extended my hand as she turned to me. "Actually, we've already met." She's been leading our digital transformation for months. The color drained from my father-in-law's face as he realized I'd been secretly hired to revitalize the very company whose investment had built his reputation. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the subtle gleam of wealth that only old money can afford. Tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements created islands of fragrant beauty amidst Manhattan's financial and social elite, all gathered for the annual Franklin Foundation Charity Gala. I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue gown. Not a designer label, but the most expensive dress I owned, and tried to calm my racing heart. "Stop fidgeting, Olivia," whispered Robert, my husband of 3 years, as we followed the hostess to our assigned table. "Dad's bringing some important clients tonight." "I know," I replied, forcing a smile. "You've mentioned it 5 times since we left the apartment." Robert squeezed my hand, both reassurance and warning. His father, James Davidson, managing partner at some venture partners, had made it clear that tonight was about impressions. For Robert, it was another opportunity to demonstrate he was worthy of eventually inheriting his father's empire. For me, it was another evening of carefully measured words and forced smiles. At our table, James Davidson held court like a modern monarch. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo and perfectly coiffed silver hair embodying success and authority. His wife, Eleanor, elegant in Chanel, offered me the obligatory air kiss as we arrived. "Olivia, darling," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes evaluating my appearance. "That color is lovely on you." "Thank you, Eleanor." I'd long ago stopped calling her mom. The forced familiarity too uncomfortable for both of us. James barely acknowledged my presence, focused on introducing Robert to the table's other occupants, 2 couples I didn't recognize, and an older man whose face seemed vaguely familiar from financial magazines. "Harrison Mitchell, Chief Investment Officer at Canwell Financial," James announced, clapping the older man on the shoulder. "His team has outperformed the market 3 years running." Robert immediately engaged, his networking skills polished from years of following his father's example. I took my seat quietly, accustomed to being an afterthought at these events. The waiter had just served the first course when James finally turned his attention to me. "And how's your little project going, Olivia? Still playing with websites?" A familiar tension crept up my spine. "Neurosync is doing well. We've doubled our user base in the last quarter. User base." James repeated with a chuckle, turning to Harrison. "That's what they call it when people use your app for free." The modern economy, all about users, never about paying customers. "We have a solid monetization strategy," I continued, keeping my voice level. "Our enterprise solution launches next month." "Enterprise solution," James echoed, his tone making the words sound absurd. "Harrison, my daughter-in-law fancies herself a tech entrepreneur. Left a perfectly good job at McKinsey to chase the eye. Startup dream." Harrison nodded politely in my direction, but seemed uninterested in pursuing the conversation. I couldn't blame him. At these events, people gravitated toward established power, not unproven potential. "It's a predictive analytics platform," I added. More for my own dignity than any expectation of interest. "We use machine learning to help companies optimize their supply chains." "Of course it is," James replied dismissively before turning. The conversation to market trends and potential interest rate hikes. I focused on my salad, the carefully arranged greens suddenly tasteless. 3 years of this treatment had taught me to pick my battles. Tonight wasn't worth the energy of confrontation. Robert's hand found mine under the table, a silent gesture of support that had grown increasingly rare. When we'd first married, he'd been my most vocal champion, excited by my vision and impressed by my expertise. Now he navigated the narrow space between loyalty to his father and support for me, a balancing act that left everyone dissatisfied. Midway through the main course, a commotion at the entrance drew attention. A woman had arrived, tall, striking, with close-cropped silver hair that somehow emphasized rather than diminished her femininity. Her simple black gown lacked the ostentatious embellishments favored by most attendees, but radiated elegance through its very simplicity. Amara Chen, I heard someone whisper at a neighboring table, just named CEO at Nexus. James straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. Harrison, isn't Nexus one of your major holdings? Harrison nodded. 30% stake. Been underperforming for years, but the board finally made some changes. Brought in fresh leadership. Surprising choice, James commented, watching Amara make her way through the crowd, stopping frequently to greet people. Bit of a risk, isn't it? Woman with no previous CEO experience. Harrison shrugged. Ford wanted someone with technical vision, not just another finance guy. She built their AI division from scratch before taking over digital strategy. Results speak for themselves. I watched Amara navigate the room with confident grace, accepting congratulations without appearing self-important. Something about her commanded respect without demanding it. She's headed this way, Eleanor murmured, subtly checking her makeup in a compact mirror. James immediately stood, his demeanor shifting to genial host. Harrison, you should have mentioned you invited her. I'd have arranged a better table. Harrison looked amused. I didn't invite her, but Nexus has been a client of yours for years, hasn't it, James? I assumed you knew her. Before James could respond, Amara arrived at our table, her smile warm but professional. Mr. Mitchell, lovely to see you again, Amara. Congratulations on the appointment. Well deserved. Harrison stood to kiss her cheek. Have you met James Davidson? Summit's been handling some of Nexus's venture investments. By reputation only, Amara replied, extending her hand to James. Your firm's portfolio performance is impressive, Mr. Davidson. James practically pined under her approval. Call me James, please, and the pleasure is mine. Your appointment has been the talk of the industry. Quite the shakeup at Nexus. Long overdue, according to our shareholders, she replied with subtle humor. We have ambitious plans for the next quarter. As James introduced Eleanor and Robert, I observed the dynamics with practiced detachment. This was James' natural habitat, proximity to power, the exchange of carefully calibrated compliments that cemented business relationships and opened doors to new opportunities. When Robert introduced me, I offered a polite smile and handshake. Congratulations on your appointment, Miss Chen. Thank you. Her eyes held mine for a moment longer than social convention required. A flicker of something, recognition, crossing her features before she turned back to James. I understand Summit's been instrumental in some of our Series C investments. Perhaps we should schedule a proper meeting next week. I'm reevaluating all our strategic partnerships. James's expression brightened at the potential opportunity. Absolutely. My office will contact yours tomorrow. Excellent. Amara turned to Harrison. I should greet the Franklin trustees before dinner ends. We're finalizing that healthcare initiative next week. As she departed, James watched her with calculating eyes. Sharp woman, Nexus might be worth a closer look for our portfolio. Already ahead of you, Harrison replied. Increased our position last month when rumors of leadership changes started circulating. James turned to Robert. Set up a briefing with our tech analysts. I want a complete overview of Nexus's market position before that meeting. Of course, Robert replied, already making notes in his phone. I returned to my barely touched salmon, invisible once again. The conversation flowed around me. Market positions, investment strategies, acquisition targets, the vocabulary of wealth and power that constituted their native language. Olivia was just telling us about her startup, Eleanor said suddenly. An unexpected and uncomfortable attempt to include me. James snorted. Hardly in the same league as Nexus, Eleanor. What's your company called? Harrison asked. More from politeness than interest. Neurosync, I replied. We develop predictive analytics solutions for supply chain optimization. Another AI startup, James interjected before Harrison could respond. Silicon Valley is churning them out like sausages these days. Most won't last 18 months. We've been operating for 2 years already, I countered, unable to let the dismissal pass unchallenged, and we're New York-based, not Silicon Valley. 2 whole years, James repeated with exaggerated impression. Well, that changes everything. He turned to Harrison with a conspiratorial smile. My son could have married a doctor or lawyer. Instead, he chose a woman with a cute little business idea. The table fell uncomfortably silent. Eleanor studied her wineglass. Robert stared at his plate, conflict evident in his tense jaw. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but refused to give James the satisfaction of seeing me flustered. Neurosync isn't cute, I said evenly. And it isn't little. We're solving real problems for real businesses. Of course you are, dear, James replied, his tone dripping with condescension. And how many employees do you have now? Still just you and that programmer friend from college. We have 15 full-time staff and 6 contractors, I replied, the words sounding defensive even to my own ears. And we've been cash flow positive for 3 quarters. James raised an eyebrow. Impressive, almost enough to afford office. Why space beyond your spare bedroom? Dad, Robert finally interjected, his voice quiet but firm. Olivia's company is doing well. The Fenton Group just signed on last month. The Fenton Group? Harrison asked, showing his first genuine interest in the conversation. Charles Fenton's logistics company. I nodded, grateful for the opportunity to speak to someone who might actually listen. They're implementing our platform across their Northeast distribution centers. Initial results show a 23% improvement in prediction accuracy for demand forecasting. Harrison studied me with new consideration. That's significant. Charles doesn't adopt new technology easily. Our approach is different. I explained, carefully avoiding technical jargon. Most predictive models focus on historical data patterns. We incorporate real-time environmental variables, weather events, social media trends, even traffic patterns to create more adaptive forecasts. Fascinating, Harrison murmured, genuinely engaged. James, clearly irritated at losing control of the conversation, cleared his throat. Speaking of technology investments, Harrison, have you looked at Meridian's new quantum computing venture? I'm considering an early position. And just like that, I was dismissed again. The brief window of professional validation closed before it had fully opened. I excused myself to the ladies' room, needing a moment away from the suffocating atmosphere of the table. In the elegant marble sanctuary of the Waldorf's restroom, I stood before the mirror, examining my reflection. At 32, I still looked younger than most of my tech industry peers. A curse in meetings where first impressions often led to being mistaken for someone's assistant rather than the founder and CTO. Don't let them see they've rattled you, I whispered to my reflection. A mantra developed through years of being the only woman in venture capital pitches and tech conferences. I was adjusting my hair when Amara Chen emerged from one of the eat stalls. Our eyes met in the mirror, and she offered a small smile as she washed her hands. These events can be exhausting, she commented, reaching for a towel. All the performative networking, especially when you're seen as an accessory rather than a participant. I replied before I could censor myself. She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I've been there for years, actually. She studied me more carefully. You're Robert Davidson's wife, Olivia, right? Yes, I extended my hand properly. And congratulations again on your appointment at Nexus. Thank you. She dried her hands and turned to face me directly. Davidson's firm has handled some of our smaller acquisitions, competent enough, but extraordinarily traditional in their approach. I smiled diplomatically. Summit has a well-established investment strategy. Too well-established, perhaps, Amara replied with a knowing look. The world is changing faster than most traditional firms can adapt. The bathroom door opened as another guest entered, ending our brief moment of candor. Amara nodded politely and departed, leaving me to wonder at the strange connection I'd felt with this woman I'd just met. When I returned to the table, dessert was being served, and the conversation had shifted to safer territory, vacation properties, and private schools. Robert glanced at me with concern as I resumed my seat, but I offered a reassuring smile. After 15 years in male-dominated spaces, I developed thick skin. James' barbs were nothing compared to what I'd endured building my career. As the evening wound down, Robert and I made our obligatory rounds, saying goodbyes and exchanging promises of future lunches and golf games that would likely never materialize. James had moved to the bar, deep in conversation with several men whose collective net worth probably exceeded the GDP of a small nation. Ready to go? Robert asked, checking his watch. We could still catch the 11 showing at the Angelica if you're interested. The suggestion, spontaneous, reminiscent of our early dating days, caught me by surprise. I'd like that. I replied, feeling some of the evening's tension dissolve. As we retrieved our coats, I noticed Amara Chen at the entrance, preparing to depart. She caught my eye and detoured in our direction. Mr. Davidson, Miss Reynolds, she acknowledged us both. A pleasure meeting you this evening. Likewise, Robert replied smoothly. I understand you'll be meeting with my father next week. Yes, among other investment partners. Her gaze shifted to me. Actually, I wanted to ask you, Miss Reynolds, are you presenting at the Women in Tech Symposium next month? I thought I saw your name on the speaker list. The question surprised me. Yes, I'm on the AI ethics panel. Excellent. I'm delivering the keynote. Perhaps we could meet for coffee beforehand. I'd be interested in hearing more about your work at NeuroSync. Before I could respond, James appeared at Robert's shoulder, his timing impeccable as always when potential business opportunities presented themselves. Miss Chen, I was hoping to catch you before you left. He extended his hand with practiced charm. I've taken the liberty of having my assistant arrange that meeting for Tuesday morning, my office, if that's convenient. Amara accepted his eye handshake with a polite smile. Actually, I'll be in Washington until Wednesday afternoon. Regulatory consultations. Thursday would work better, and I'd prefer to meet at Nexus. I like to conduct business on my own territory. A flicker of annoyance crossed James's face at both the correction and the assertion of control, but he recovered quickly. Thursday it is, and may I say again, what a pleasure it was to meet you this evening. The pleasure was mine, Amara replied, her expression revealing nothing. I look forward to learning more about Summit's vision for the future. She turned to me. And I'll have my assistant contact you about that coffee, Miss Reynolds. And may I say again, what a pleasure it was to meet you this evening. The pleasure was mine, Amara replied, her expression revealing nothing. I look forward to learning more about Summit's vision thief. He was particularly difficult tonight. It's nothing new, I replied, gazing out at the city lights blurring past my window. I'm used to it. Still, the comment about marrying a doctor or lawyer was out of line. I turned to study my husband's profile, wondering when exactly he had started to resemble his father, not just physically, but in the subtle ways he navigated the world. The message contained only 2 paragraphs. Miss Reynolds, I'd like to discuss a matter of mutual interest. Your work at Star NeuroSync has caught my attention, particularly your innovations in predictive analytics for supply chain optimization. I believe we could benefit from a private conversation away from the social constraints of Charity Gallus and the watchful eyes of Summit Venture Partners. Would tomorrow at 10 a.m., I watched as he settled at his desk, opening his laptop with practiced efficiency. The spontaneous movie suggestion was now a distant memory, replaced by James's demands and Robert's ingrained obedience. Our evening had fallen back into its familiar pattern. Robert absorbed in Summit business while I navigated my own path alone. I believe in getting straight to the point, Miss Reynolds. I've been following your work at NeuroSync for some time now. Your approach to integrated predictive modeling is ingenious, particularly the real-time variable incorporation. The specific technical knowledge caught me off guard. Most SUITE executives could discuss technology concepts broadly, but rarely delved into implementation details. Whether that comes through acquisition, partnership, or another arrangement entirely depends on various factors, including my connection to Summit Venture Partners. I concluded, that's one complicate ion. Yes, she studied me carefully. Your father-in-law's firm holds significant influence with our board. James Davidson has been quite vocal about the direction he believes Nexus should take, which is unsurprisingly the safe traditional path that maintains the status quo. Venture partners who claim to value cutting-edge technology but invested only in safer iterations of proven concepts. So why approach me directly? I asked. If Summit opposes your vision, wouldn't meeting with a founder of a potential acquisition target who happens to be married to a Summit executive create complications? I prefer to form my own judgments, Amara replied evenly. You want to hire me away from my own company? I want to give you the resources to develop your technology to its full potential, Amara corrected. NeuroSync's approach is revolutionary, but you're constrained by limited capital and infrastructure. At Nexus, you'd have access to global data centers, enterprise-level testing environments, and engineering teams that could implement your models across multiple industries simultaneously. Robert had never mentioned bringing Neurosync to Summit's attention. He'd suggested it once early in our startup journey, but claimed the timing wasn't right when I expressed interest. Had he been advocating for me behind the scenes all along? I see. I've surprised you, Amomar observed. Perhaps I've overstepped. My innovations dismissed as cute little business ideas. I'd need time to consider, I said finally. Of course. Amara slid a business card across the table. Not her standard corporate contact, but a handwritten email address. This is my private account. Your decision deserves careful thought. She gathered her things, preparing to leave. Each possibility, each decision point suddenly charged with new significance. For years, I'd accepted the limitations imposed by others' perceptions. Now, alternative paths were emerging, directions I hadn't considered viable. My phone rang as I approached our building. My CTO, Michael, calling with rare urgency. The core predictive model is solid. Something's corrupting the data inputs. For the next 4 hours, we traced the issue through layers of complexity, eventually identifying the problem. Fenton had integrated our system with their legacy warehouse management software without using the API we designed specifically for that purpose. I'm headed out, I told Michael, collecting my laptop. Keep monitoring the Chicago feeds. Call me immediately if anything fluctuates more than 5%. Will do. He hesitated, then added. Liv, we need more engineering support. This kind of firefighting isn't sustainable with our current team. I know. I kept my expression neutral despite the internal alarm. There's no connection. We met for the first time last night, just like you did. James studied me with the calculating gaze he typically reserved for investment targets. Yet, she specifically mentioned meeting you for coffee regarding some tech symposium. Women in tech, I confirmed. Good man, Walsh commented. Played golf with him at Winged Foot years ago. James's expression registered mild surprise and recalculation. The revelation that I came from financial circles, however peripheral, seemed to trigger a minor reassessment. As appetizers arrived, the conversation flowed predictably through market conditions, investment strategies, and carefully sanitized corporate gossip. Walsh's expression soured slightly. That's what the tech people keep saying. But I've been in this industry since before the dot bubble. I've seen how these innovation frenzies play out. Wise perspective, James interjected smoothly. Summit's analysis suggests a more measured approach would better serve shareholder interests. Spoken like someone who's never had to answer to shareholders, James replied with forced joviality. Vernon and I have navigated multiple market cycles. We've learned which innovations merit investment and which are simply expensive distractions, like predictive analytics for supply chain optimization. I asked pointedly. They represented the entrenched power structures that had defined corporate technology for decades. Men who controlled capital allocation without truly understanding the innovations they were evaluating. By the time dessert arrived, my decision was forming with unexpected certainty. The path forward wasn't about choosing between my marriage and my professional potential. Dad blocked it each time. His admission carried a weight of frustrated loyalty. Even when the tech analysts were impressed, he wouldn't move forward. Because it's my company, I suggested gently. Robert's silence confirmed my suspicion. We walked half a block before he spoke again. He's wrong about you, Liv. I'm reevaluating some things. Professional directions mostly. Robert tensed slightly. You're not thinking of closing Neurosync, are you? Despite the implementation problems? No, I assured him. But I'm exploring options that might give our technology the platform it deserves. I hesitated, then added. Options that don't depend on your father's approval or its investment. James Davidson had underestimated me for the last time, not just as his son's wife or a cute little business owner, but as a strategic player in my own right. By the time we reached our apartment, my decision was made. The only question remaining was how to navigate the inevitable collision of worlds that would follow. You're up early, he commented, pouring me a cup. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about the Fenton implementation, I replied. The half-truth coming easily. We stabilized it yesterday, but I'm concerned about the underlying architecture. Robert nodded, his attention already drifting back to his phone. Try to make it work if you can. Dad rarely extends these invitations. He kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that had replaced the passionate embraces of our early years. I'll probably be late tonight. Strategy dinner with the Nexus team. After he left, I showered and dressed with deliberate care, selecting a structured navy dress that projected authority without ostentation. I take it you've considered my proposition. Both propositions, I clarified. Employment versus acquisition. I'm interested in exploring the latter. Interesting. Her tone revealed nothing of her reaction. May I ask what influenced your decision? Resources and autonomy, I replied honestly. If Nexus acquires Neurosync, my team remains intact. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, yet it complicated matters considerably. If Robert joined Nexus's board, any business relationship between Neurosync and Nexus would create an immediate conflict of interest. I see, I said carefully. And what's your position on his appointment? Officially, I'm evaluating all board recommendations with equal consideration, she replied diplomatically. Fenton's CIO is on the line, he reported earlier than scheduled. The next hour disappeared into technical explanations and reassurances. Charles Fenton himself joined the call midway, his gruff voice conveying both frustration and determination. Your system promised a revolution in our distribution efficiency, Miss Reynolds, he stated bluntly. The concept is still promising, but execution matters more than innovation, Miss Reynolds. The comment echoed uncomfortably close to James Davidson's philosophy, though coming from Fenton, who actually built and delivered physical products, rather than merely financing them. It carried more legitimate weight as afternoon faded into evening. I finalized my strategy for the coming days. I need to finalize some things at the office first. Before leaving Neurosync, I called an emergency meeting with our leadership team. Michael, our CTO, Rita, our CFO, and Sanjay, our head of product development. They deserve to know about the potential Nexus acquisition before rumors began circulating. Nothing is finalized, I emphasized as we gathered in our small conference room. They understood the dynamics at play. This acquisition would provide everything we've wanted, I continued. Enterprise-level infrastructure, global distribution channels, integration with existing Nexus systems. Our technology would transform their capabilities while their resources would solve our scaling limitations. Olivia, James greeted me with unusual warmth. Glad you could join us. Vernon was quite impressed with your insights last night. The abrupt shift from yesterday's dismissal to today's approval might have been flattering if it weren't so transparently tactical. James Davidson didn't change his fundamental assessments. You've been speaking with Amara Chen? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. We met briefly this morning regarding the Women in Tech Symposium. She mentioned board changes were under consideration. Not entirely a lie, though the deliberate omission felt precarious. Robert glanced between us, sensing undercurrents, but unable to identify their source. I'm afraid I won't be able to attend Thursday's meeting after all, I said with deliberate casualness. A potential acquisition opportunity has emerged for Neurosync. The discussions are at a critical stage. Robert turned to me in surprise. Acquisition? You didn't mention this. Thank you for the offer, I said politely. But we have excellent representation already. Robert studied me with growing awareness, connecting dots I hadn't intended to reveal quite yet. Dad, I think Olivia is capable of handling her own negotiations. The support, though minimal, was meaningful. A small step toward the independence he'd claimed to believe in, but rarely demonstrated. This is completely inappropriate, James continued, anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. Robert is being considered for Nexus's board. His wife's company being acquired by Nexus would create an immediate conflict of interest. I'm well aware of the potential conflict, I replied calmly, which is why I've been transparent about it now before any agreements are finalized. That's not really a difficult decision, the declaration. So unexpected, so contrary to years of acquiescence, momentarily silenced James. Eleanor looked between father and son with an unreadable expression, while I struggled to maintain my composure in the face of Robert's sudden allegiance. For perhaps the first time, James Davidson was forced to confront the gap between his perception of me and the objective truth of my accomplishments. I wasn't aware of those metrics, he admitted finally. The closest he would come to acknowledging his misjudgment. You never asked, I replied simply. The remainder of dinner passed in strained conversation about safer topics. Eleanor's charity work, an upcoming gallery opening, Robert's college roommate's recent divorce. Robert was quiet for several blocks, the city lights creating patterns of illumination and shadow across his features. Finally, he asked the question that mattered most. Do you want this live not just professionally, but personally working at Nexus, potentially in opposition to my father's vision for the company? The question deserved complete honesty. Whatever you decide about Nexus, I'm with you. I should have been more clearly on your side long before now. The declaration, simple but profound, shifted something fundamental between us. Not a complete repair of years of accumulated distance, but perhaps the beginning of a recalibration, a relationship balanced on mutual respect rather than acquiescence. Limited assessment. As midnight approached, I sent a brief email to Amara Chen. Looking forward to tomorrow's discussions. Neurosync is prepared to move forward with serious consideration of acquisition terms contingent on appropriate valuation and team integration guarantees. I appreciate your recognition of our technology's potential. The culmination would likely occur in a corporate boardroom rather than a lavish charity gala. But the fundamental narrative remained the same. Those who underestimate based on preconception rather than performance eventually face the consequences of their limited vision. In James Davidson's case, that reckoning was rapidly approaching. This unprecedented appearance could only mean one thing. He was moving aggressively to counter the Nexus acquisition. Tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes, I instructed, mentally reorganizing my day. And Michael, don't share any company information. Nothing about clients, financials, or technology architecture. Should we expect him to? I shook my head. I doubt he knows his father is here. The conference room door was open, revealing James seated at the head of our modest meeting table, a position of authority he assumed automatically regardless of context. The two associates flanking him were young men I recognized from summit events, both wearing nearly identical Navy suits and expressions of practiced deference. This is unexpected, I commented, scanning the key terms. The valuation was precisely 15% higher than what I'd mentally calculated as Nexus's likely opening offer. High enough to appear generous, but not so excessive as to seem desperate. Summit recognizes potential when we see it, James replied smoothly. It was manipulation disguised as insight, a tactic James had likely employed successfully countless times before. That's an interesting perspective, I replied carefully, though it conveniently ignores Nexus's legitimate need for advanced predictive analytics capabilities. Precisely what Neurosync provides. I studied him carefully, noting the subtle tells that betrayed his confidence, the slight upturn at the corner of his mouth, the relaxed posture of a man accustomed to getting his way through superior positioning. How do you know the details of Nexus's offer? I asked. I haven't received their term sheet yet. Then I'll have my answer by 5, I replied calmly, though I should mention that I'm meeting with Nexus at 10 to receive their formal offer. It would be irresponsible not to compare both options thoroughly. The information visibly disturbed him. Confirmation that his ambush strategy had been designed to preempt rather than counter Nexus's proposal. She scanned the document with her CFO's practiced efficiency. The valuation is ambitious, almost suspiciously so. It's a blocking move, Michael concluded, understanding immediately. He's trying to prevent the Nexus acquisition, exactly. I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. We need to prepare for the Nexus meeting. What's happening? I debated how much to reveal via text, settling on measured transparency. Your father just left Neurosync. Summit has made an acquisition offer with a 5 p.m. deadline. Meeting Nexus at 10 to receive their terms. His response came quickly. He didn't tell me. Coming to your office now. Dad's gone completely off protocol, he announced without preamble, closing my office door behind him. Summit never authorized an acquisition offer for Neurosync. He's acting unilaterally. This revelation changed everything. The term sheet is on Summit letterhead. I pointed out it appears official. He must really feel threatened by the Nexus deal, I concluded. Robert nodded grimly. It's not just about business. It's about control. Dad can't stand the idea that you've developed relationships at Nexus independent of Summit's influence, especially relationships that might affect his standing with the board. Nexus's team created an atmosphere of collaborative professionalism. Amara stood as we entered, her expression revealing momentary surprise at Robert's presence before recovering to polite neutrality. Miss Reynolds, thank you for hosting us. Mr. Davidson, I wasn't expecting you to join these discussions. The terms Nexus offered were ambitious but reasonable. A valuation approximately 8% lower than Summit's proposal, but with substantially more attractive equity components for key personnel and clearer commitments to technology autonomy, where James had offered a higher purchase price. Where James had offered a higher purchase price, Amara proposed a more balanced structure that recognized NeuroSync's value beyond immediate financial metrics. Well, need your decision by tomorrow morning, she concluded, addressing me directly. Our board meets at noon to formalize the acquisition approval. Assuming your acceptance, we'd announce publicly on Monday. You'll have my answer by 9 tomorrow, I confirmed, maintaining professional composure despite the momentous nature of the decision before me. No, he won't, Robert agreed, his expression troubled but resolute. But that's not your problem to solve. It affects us both, I pointed out gently. Your position at Summit would become precarious. He turned to face me directly, his expression more decided than I'd seen in years. The timing seemed complicated given everything. With NeuroSync, understanding dawned with unexpected clarity. Robert had been considering his own professional independence, his own break from James's controlling influence even before the current situation developed. The Nexus acquisition didn't create his desire for autonomy. My father's understanding of appropriate business conduct appears to be deteriorating rapidly. Should I have security restrict their access? Rita asked. Obviously uncomfortable with the developing situation, I considered briefly before shaking my head. No, let's address this directly. Adam flinched slightly at the direct reference, though James maintained his composed facade. Market conditions evolve rapidly, he replied smoothly. Summit's interest in NeuroSync reflects recognition of its strategic potential. Recognition that conveniently emerged only when Nexus expressed acquisition interest, I noted. You're acting unilaterally without proper governance approval. The direct confrontation, son challenging father on matters of professional conduct, created a palpable tension in the room. James's expression hardened as he recognized the full implication. Robert wasn't just aware of the procedural violation, but willing to name it explicitly. Family matters becoming unnecessarily complicated by business considerations. That conflation is precisely the problem, Robert replied with unexpected firmness. Summit is a professional investment firm, not a family instrument. Governance standards exist to protect institutional integrity, not personal preferences. The rebuke, measured but unmistakable, represented a fundamental shift in their relationship. I see, he said finally, his tone carrying resignation beneath the professional veneer. You've made your decision then? Not yet, I corrected gently. As I mentioned earlier, we'll evaluate both offers thoroughly before responding by your deadline. Proper consideration is essential for decisions of this magnitude. The revelation landed like a physical blow. James stared at his son momentarily speechless, an unprecedented state for a man accustomed to controlling every conversation. Meridian, he finally managed, disbelief evident in his tone. Our direct competitor. You would abandon the firm I built for you. I'm pursuing a role aligned with my values and vision, Robert corrected calmly. For a brief moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across James's features before disappearing behind his practiced corporate mask. Of course, he replied, though his tone suggested uncertainty rather than conviction. Family endures. After they departed, Robert and I remained in the conference room, processing the confrontation's implications. It represented everything I'd originally valued in our relationship before James's influence had distorted its balance. As afternoon faded toward James's arbitrary 5 deadline, Rita, Michael, and I completed our comprehensive assessment of both acquisition offers. The analysis confirmed our initial impression. Summit offered superior immediate financial terms, but significantly less strategic alignment with NeuroSync's technology vision. At 4:55 p.m., the board will have questions about family loyalty and conflicting interests. Robert has already addressed those concerns. I replied calmly. His resignation from Summit will be submitted tomorrow morning. Meridian Capital has offered him leadership of their technology innovation division. The combined impact of these developments, Neurosync choosing Nexus despite some